And ESPN1420.com. Welcome back into the Great Scat Show, the Great Sports Callers Open Think Tank. Happy Monday, everybody. As promised, joining me at this time, my buddy Oleh Kosel. He writes over at the Sports Nation Pelicans blog site, thebirdrights.com. That's rights with a W, the Bird Rights, WRITES.com. You can follow him on Twitter as well, at the Bird Rights, and his personal Twitter, at Red Hopeful. Oleh, free agency coming up in less than 48 hours, the draft behind us, this Jrue Holiday story. You know, here we are at the end of June, and there's still plenty of Pelican stuff to talk about.
Yeah, this is unusual, isn't it? Usually it's just free agency, but, yeah, we've got a little bit extra spice going on this year.
Yeah, and it was supposed to be, so much for the quiet offseason many of us were expecting for the Pelicans. Let's start off with the news that, has a lot of fans talking, and you had a piece over at thebirdrights.com about the 76ers getting off easy. And if anyone doesn't know what I'm referencing, Jrue Holiday, starting point guard for the Pelicans, he came to the Pelicans a little over 2 years ago in a trade on draft night. The Pels sent Nerlens Noel, 6th overall pick, and a first-rounder the next year to Philly in exchange for Holiday. That pick ended up being the 10th overall pick the following year, which Philly selected. Elfrid Payton traded him to Orlando. The story is the NBA ordered the 76ers to pay the Pelicans $3 million. Pelicans put in a claim. That's what, we don't know what they requested, but that's what they received, claiming that the 76ers did not reveal to the Pelicans that Jrue played with a stress reaction in his leg the last few weeks he was in Philly. Let's start off with a couple of things you've noted in your piece, and for anyone that wants more in-depth stuff, they can go to thebirdrights.com. Explain, and you did a nice job of it in your piece, why the Pelicans medical staff wouldn't have noticed this whenever he eventually came over to the team, several weeks later, because remember, it was his honeymoon, so he was a little late coming over whenever he took his physical and finally got cleared to play for the Pels.
That's right, Scott. The reason I think the Pelicans' medical staff probably missed this, even though they don't have the most sparkling record, is the fact that there was about roughly a 3-month period as to where he probably had his stress fracture. If we let's just say the 2012-13 season and on April 17th. By the time he made his way to New Orleans, it was around the second week of July, or maybe third week, I'm not sure. So that's at least 12 weeks. Now, normally, tibial stress fractures are considered low risk. What that means is they can actually heal on their own. As long as there's not a complete break in the bone, they can heal themselves in about a 6 to 8 week period. So if that's indeed the case of what happened, and he had 12 weeks, there's just no way that the doctors probably would have seen it. Now, probably they had the x-rays, they have the typical MRIs and all that, but that just wouldn't have shown up. And if Jrue Holiday, this is the most interesting part, Scott, is the fact that he didn't mention anything either to the staff, because you have to assume that they asked the general questions, the standard questions, and it's startling to me that didn't come up.
Right. Did he know? And if he didn't, wouldn't the Players Union be going after Philly hard right now? But he had to know. So did he not say anything? Did he mention that it hurt? There's a lot to this story that clearly we don't know. We just, Philly.com, PhillySports.com reports over the weekend, hey, they paid $3 million to the Pelicans because, he played for a couple weeks on this thing and they didn't let him know. But there's more to this story than we're getting. All we can do is base off of what we know at this point. There's clearly a lot here that probably will never see the light of day, Oleh.
Mm-hmm. I agree. The major thing for me is, one, he didn't mention anything, but then you almost have to wonder, did Philadelphia actually have some kind of exit, as similar to an exit interview? Do they do medical tests on all their players? And did they happen to see something and they had almost completely healed or something along those lines and they just didn't tell Jrue Holiday? We really don't know. As you said, there's a million questions that are going to probably remain unanswered. All we know is that the Pelicans got $3 million. And what's interesting, Scott, is in the collective bargaining agreement, whenever this rule is broken as to where a team does not divulge all the relevant information to another team, the maximum punishment, according to the rules, is $1 million. Now, I don't understand why it was a $3 million penalty. Also, in addition, the rules state that you can have actual rescission. So basically, we could go back to the way it was before the contract even took place. So Philadelphia would end up back with Jrue Holiday. We would get Nerlens Noel and everything that came from Elfrid Payton's deal. So I don't know. There was a lot of ways they could have gone. So it's kind of startling, too, the fact that the NBA ruled, well, we're just going to slap down a $3 million fine. Why did they go past the $1 million? That'll probably be another question we'll never know. So
Yeah, I know, in your piece you wrote a lot about essentially your take is, and you can expound on this, Ollie. Philly should have been hitting with a little bit more of a penalty than just a $3 million. I won't even call it a fine, just a $3 million check that they had to write to New Orleans.
Absolutely. This borders roughly what Minnesota did back in 2000. That's by far the biggest penalty the NBA has ever handed out. And what happened in that time was the Timberwolves were caught trying to circumvent the salary cap. They were trying to basically get Joe Smith to agree to take a couple of really low contracts, one-year contracts for like $1 million, $1.5 million, because they didn't have the money at the time. And they promised him they were going to pay him like close to $90 million for like a long-term contract, like 6 or 7 years. But they got caught. So not only did they get fined $3.5 million, they also initially lost 5 of their future first-round draft picks. That's incredible. Now that's a fine. Now I think that's going to dissuade some people. I just feel like with what the NBA handed out to Philly, it's not really going to stop general managers or whoever else wants to go down this route from kind of being shady with their business.
Right, maybe leaving out a detail here or there. I hear where you're coming from. Oleh Kosel of thebirdrights.com, our guest right now here on The Great Scott Show, the great sports callers open think tank, ESPN 1420 and .com, discussing the Pelicans offseason thus far and the Jrue Holiday news. Having said all of that, Ollie, Jrue was healthy enough to play throughout training camp with the team, season before last. Played in the preseason, played the first few months of the season. I mean, even if we'll never know, but like you could make an argument that even if they knew, okay, he had a stress, a stress reaction for the last couple weeks of a season, maybe they still make the trade. Maybe the trade's altered a little bit. Maybe it's more protected. I don't know. Like we don't know what exactly would have happened and what wouldn't have. And I agree with your point that the penalty probably should be worth, more than $3 million that they write to Tom Benson. I agree with you there. But the reality is, I would love one of Philly's draft picks and I would love a harsher fine. But at this point, it's done. You know what I mean? Like nothing's going to change. This, as it sits, like if you get, wrapped up in sort of, we're not going to stand for this, you're just going to end up being angry and mad, but it's not going to change anything. I think the Pelicans at this point just, what they need to do, Ollie, is just that $3 million they got, just spend it on some specialized doctor that can just heal his leg and make sure that he can play.
I like your thinking. That's right. I would love to see Dell Devs put all that money in a new state-of-the-art, basically what the Phoenix Sun staff has over down in Arizona. The way they can keep their players healthy, thanks to all the specialists and all the specialized equipment to monitor everything, that'd be great. Spend that $3 million on that. Absolutely.
I think the revelation that it existed beforehand and that it's been going on a little longer than we expected. He had the screw removed, earlier this month, and hopefully he can get back to the level he was playing at in 2012 and 2013 in Philly, leading into the All-Star break. Hopefully he can get back to that form, Ollie. But I think just knowing that this is going on a little bit longer, the biggest concern moving forward to me is just, is this going to be a constant? I mean, he's set to make a little less than $11 million next year. Clearly, he's a big part of the plans of this team when he's on the floor. But if he's back on the bench for a big chunk of the season, you don't really have much trade value with him with his injury history and the news like that. It's just overall, return on goods. You're not getting the Jrue Holiday and you may never get the Jrue Holiday a lot of us had hoped to see. It's kind of cliche, but at this point, all you can really do is hope for the best. I mean, am I missing something there? Because there's really nothing else left.
The perfect way to look at this. I mean, realistic expectations. 3 years in a row, he's had some kind of stress reaction or a fracture. that to me signals that he cannot handle the rigors of a full NBA season. Whether his bones are too brittle, whether he doesn't jump correctly, who knows? His diet's awful. Something's off. And I think if anything we've learned to expect is that it'll probably happen again. I don't know how we could think differently. I just don't know what to say. He's hoping, I know that he said this screw probably bothered him, that I think one or two other secondary opinions he went and saw told him that maybe removing the screw would alleviate concerns. Like last season, it was just the pain threshold he couldn't get over for some reason, and they were fearing that it would re-break or something like that. But I don't know. I don't think just taking out a screw is going to help. I really don't. I'm afraid. I mean, bottom line is I think the Pelicans should be afraid. All fans, everything. You've got 2 more years. As you said, it's going to be impossible to move somebody who's perpetually hurt. So I don't know.
You hope for the best, but you certainly don't expect it. Oleh Kosel, our guest from thebirdrights.com, right here on the Great Scott Show, the Great Sports Callers Open Think Tank on this Monday afternoon, ESPN 1420 and .com. All right, let's move to a little bit of other Pelicans news. The draft last Thursday, they had 1 pick, 56th overall. They take Branden Dawson, trade him to the Clippers for cash considerations. And I think, Oleh, a lot of us that followed this team closely, we weren't expecting them to do very much on draft night, especially considering they didn't have a first-rounder. But let's be honest, in the last, 9-10 years, the chances of a player taken in the last 10 picks of the second round actually becoming an impact rotational player is actually less than 3%. I mean, they dealt him for cash. I wasn't surprised. If they hadn't have dealt him, his chances of making the team, as the 13th or 14th guy on there, he's most likely, Branden Dawson is probably going to be a summer league guy trying to make the team each year. If he ends up going and making a big impact with the Clippers, then have at Dell, go ahead. The chances of that are extremely slim.
Yeah, it's infinitesimal for sure. But the reason the draft is such big news, as you well know, Scott, it sells hope to fans. So regardless of whether the pick was, in the top 10 in the lottery or something like that, or even down in the second round, a lot of people were looking forward to it because it just signals hope. It signals, hey, we get to choose something that may help the team. So, yeah, I could see why the fans got upset. I just didn't like the fact that we had to stay up almost 5 hours to that news. That was not the worst part.
Man, they're talking cash considerations. What about our sleep considerations, dude?
Exactly.
Well, having said that, what was your take on the draft overall?
I think it was a pretty deep draft. I think most teams did really well. There was just a few that kind of left me scratching my head. Philadelphia nabbing all the big men, it seemed, that were on the board, all the centers, and then vice versa. The Celtics went after nothing but guards. So they had both teams had a plethora of draft picks, and they seemed to strictly draft. I don't know. It was just a one-sided draft for both teams. I just didn't understand it. But a lot of good teams. Even some good teams, like the Dallas Mavericks, for instance, picked up Justin Anderson. There were some teams that landed some talent that may actually help them next year. So it'll be kind of interesting to see.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of my concern. It seems like the players that we expect to turn into solid NBA players, Western Conference teams, right? I mean, when I'm watching the draft, I'm hoping – when I watch the draft and free agency, I'm obviously paying attention to the Pelicans. The second thing I'm paying attention to, Ollie, is – all right, which good players are switching conferences? Because I want more good quality players to go to the Eastern Conference. But between Towns and Russell in Minnesota and L.A., I was hoping the Lakers would take Okafor or Whip or do something. I mean, I don't like that. That when I look at this draft, I think a couple years down the line, the better players out of it, in my opinion, are on Western Conference teams.
Yeah, Minnesota's going to be scary.
Give them some time, man. They've only got, 3 or 4 number 1 overall picks on there, although I don't even know. Even though technically Anthony Bennett is, it's not like we can count it there as a quality player. All right, this is the big one for you, man, free agency. Explain to our listeners here at ESPN 1420 and .com, and my guess is it'll probably lead into the discussion of Omar Ashik, but explain to our listeners why sort of not just from a how do I put this? Not just from a consistency standpoint of sort of turning it back and trying to keep the core together and what that would do on the court, but from an actual, spending standpoint. Explain to our listeners why the Pelicans re-signing some of their own actually gives them, a little more leeway to spend money, allowing them to go over the cap, while, if they kind of let some of the guys walk, they don't quite have as much flexibility this offseason.
That's right, Scott. It boils down to that the salary cap is a soft cap. So that means there's a level that the NBA releases each year, and I think next year is going to be roughly in the $66, $67 million range. That means teams can spend up to that amount. Now, there's all these stipulations that go along with the salary cap, and as you alluded to, there's cap holds, there's a lot of rights. So teams, once with their existing players, they can keep them. For instance, there's let me think. There's a lot of exceptions and rights, as I was saying, but what you're referring to with Omer Sheik is a cap hold situation, as to where last year's personnel can be re-signed regardless of whether we're under or over the salary cap. And when we're over it, we want to actually re-sign these type of players. So, for instance, Omer Sheik, he was making, or he's going to probably be looking at a contract between $9-10 million a year. Now, if we pay him that, we can obviously pay that because we can go over the salary cap. But if we were to go out on free agency and try and get a center, the most we could spend is roughly around $8 million. And that's if we renounce all the cap holds on everybody that's had their contract expire. For instance, Jeff Whitby, Norris Cole, you name it. We would have to go ahead and eliminate all these holds just to be able to sign a center, a free agent center, for $7-8 million a year. So that's why, even though people are really down on the Sheik, it makes all the business sense in the world that Dell Demps go ahead and goes that route, because that just gives him and the team a lot more freedom to sign a lot more free agents.
Yeah, so. You mentioned it. You bring back Ashik, you bring back Norris Cole, and you'd have to get rid of both of them to sign a guy who's not as good for less money, one guy. And then, and we can, look, we've discussed in the past, and I'm sure you've debated it nauseum with plenty of Pelicans fans, Omar Ashik and the value to the team and what he brings to it. Alvin Gentry likes him for the Pelicans. I think he's sticking around and staying. And next offseason, when Gordon comes off the books, you're going to have, plenty of space and, room to roam and do stuff. I look at the Atlanta Hawks this past year. They kept the core together. They had a good year health-wise. They kind of had that health luck for most of the season. And they won 60 games, right? You bring the core back, you get a little bit of health luck, and the difference between the Hawks and the Pelicans, aside from one plays in a really tough conference and the other one in a really weak conference, is the Hawks have some all-stars. They don't have an MVP candidate. So you keep a core together, and you've got an MVP candidate in Anthony Davis. It makes all the sense in the world, in my opinion. So then you start looking at, all right, few minor changes on the bench. My question to you, Ollie, is Dante Cunningham coming back next year, or do the Pelicans look elsewhere?
Dante Cunningham, I don't believe will be back. I know a lot of fans want him, obviously, for what he did on the floor, as to where he brought that energy, that passion at a really good price. I think that Cunningham will probably be able to fetch about $2 to maybe $3 million a year somewhere else. I don't think, with Alvin Gentry coming over to New Orleans, I don't think he fits as well as he did, say, Monty Williams, strategic and schemes and all that. I don't know. I think Cunningham served his purpose here, but he can be easily replaceable. For instance, I know the Pelicans, it was just announced last night, that they're looking in possibly bringing back Al-Farouq Aminu. Now, he would make for a much better fit. He has the athleticism. He could be utilized at the 4 as a small ball 4, as to where Monty Williams always just played him at small forward. For Cunningham, he's just not elite. He's just average in almost every facet outside of the hustle. So I just don't think he's going to be back, because there's better fits out there for Dell Demps.
Well, yeah, you say Aminu, and everybody a lot of folks listening are turning their stomachs because they're thinking about him in a Monty Williams style offense. Obviously, it would be different with Gentry. I'm not sure about Aminu. You think there's a good chance there? Let's talk about another former New Orleans Hornet / Pelican. What about Jason Smith?
Jason Smith's getting a lot of attention as well, because he's out there. I know Phil Jackson has stated he wants to re-sign him back in New York, and it's no reason why. He's a great locker room presence. Besides the stability he kind of brings on the court, he'd be a great guy to have in the locker room. I'm pretty sure in New York City they've got, I don't know, I think they're a pretty divided locker room up there. One second you've got Carmelo Anthony being upset about the draft pick that the Knicks just made, and then the next day he's retracting all that. So I don't know. It's kind of wishy-washy up there. So I can see why Smith would want to be retained, but Pelicans should go after him because not only does he know the guys already, so he could fit in seamlessly, he's got a pretty good outside shot that almost stretches out to the three-point line. So Gentry's going to want to have nearly pretty much everybody on the floor be a shooter. So outside of Ashik, 22 to 25 minutes, pretty much everybody else that's going to step on that floor is going to be able to make a jumper to at least about 16 feet. And Smith fits right into that plan.
Well, with that being said, Oleh Kosel, our guest, he writes for thebirdwrites.com, Pelicans blog for Sports Nation. With that being said, in terms of outside shooting, how about a guy like a Jared Dudley?
Yeah, he has stated that he has no interest in leaving the Milwaukee Bucks, but I think players just say that a lot of times because one, they are happy, but they wouldn't mind it if they got another contract somewhere else, and especially being reunited with Alvin Gentry. I'm sure he wouldn't mind coming on down to New Orleans, playing alongside all-world Anthony Davis, and he would just be asked to sit on the perimeter, shooting wide open, 23-footers without a man 6 feet away from him. So I don't know. I think it's a perfect situation, but then again, I'm not sure if that's where Dell Demps wants to put his MLE. That's pretty much most of the options Demps has. He's going to be operating with a small budget as to where if he goes out and gets a Dudley or somebody like that, he's going to pretty much have to spend the rest of his remaining money he's got left. So Dudley's probably going to cost around $5 million, I'm thinking.
Wow.
So if we go after him, it's going to limit everything else he can do. That means a lot of other minimum type of salary players on the roster, and I'm not sure we want to go back down that road because if you remember, Scott, last year the way the season started was kind of bad. Darius Miller, he was just awful. We had Patrick Young sitting on the end of the bench who never even got no game, but yet he was taking up the roster space. I'm not sure if Demps wants to go down that route again.
Yeah, and Jimmer Fredette didn't exactly work out either. Again, amazing that Salmons and Rivers, you're able to turn into some good players like Cole and a contributor like Cunningham. Some guys, that wore a Pelicans uniform, restricted. What about Alexis Ajinça and Luke Babbitt? Do you see them back with New Orleans next year?
I can see Luke Babbitt coming back. Unless New Orleans scores one or two other free agents that can shoot the ball well, I don't understand why you don't want Luke back. He missed qualifying for the three-point field goal percentage among the league leaders by just like a few attempts, I think. I know Jim Eichenhofer was tracking it all season. He came pretty close. So for his contract and what he's going to be paid, it's wonderful to have somebody like him just sitting out there throw him out there for 15 minutes a game and give him about 4 or 5 good looks from three, and he's going to make at least half of them because that's pretty much what he shot last year, 50%. Now, on the other hand, Alexis Ajinça, I don't think he fits into the system. He kind of labors up and down the court, way more so than Omer Ashik. He's a back-to-the-basket type of player, and Gentry's not going to be running too many post-up plays. And if he does, it's just going to be for Anthony Davis probably. So I don't see how Ajinça fits in the team. I think Jeff Whitby has a much better chance of coming back.
I'm 100% in agreement with you there, Oleh. And I guess to wrap up the free agency discussion as it pertains to the Pelicans, any other names that stand out to you as potential candidates to whether it be return or sign in free agency? And, to our listeners, keep in mind, we're talking about some guys that are, back-in rotation players because we both believe that, the core of this team is likely all going to be back.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Norris Cole's going to be back, Luke Babbitt, Jeff Whitby. So that's 3 names right there. Iffy on Dante Cunningham, but we'll see. But besides that, there's room for at least 3 or 4 more players. And I already mentioned Alfredo Camino, and if he could just develop his three-point shot, I think he'd be a wonderful addition.
Don't you think? I'm sorry to cut you off, Oleh. Don't you think that would have happened a couple years ago? I mean, that thing coming out of his hand is like it's tough to watch, man.
Did you watch him at all last year, Scott? His shot actually looked a whole lot better. I don't think the Pelicans did him any kind of service. First of all, Monty didn't allow him to shoot that ball, and I don't think anybody worked with him one-on-one on it over the year. through the course of the season. Excuse me. I think Rick Carlisle did. You could tell how many times he was shooting the ball out in Dallas. I think he shot the ball at least twice as much from the perimeter. And like I said, he had the same percentage, but the last month or so, and he was really on fire during the playoffs. He proved he might have something. I'm not holding my breath. We just put up an article, and in the comment section, I told everybody I'm not going to hold my breath on that. I mean, it's probably better to look somewhere else.
And you guys make a good case. Peyton Fine, one of the writers for you guys over at thebirdrights.com, had an interesting piece today up on Aminu stating the case, and that's why I like to bring you guys on, because it's not just, well, this guy was good, so sign him, or this guy was bad, don't sign him. It's detailed, intricate, in-depth, looking at the system, the new staff, where it fits, and I think, when it comes to the birdrights.com and bourbonstreetshots.com, I love bringing all you guys on the show, because you get more in-depth analysis as to why something could work or couldn't work. All right, before I let you run, Oleh Kosel has been our guest. You can give the Bird Rights a follow on Twitter at the Bird Rights. That's not bird rights like contract bird rights. It's rights as in like with a pencil. The Bird Rights, WRITES. The last 6 letters on that one. And you can follow him on Twitter at Red Hopeful. Your final take on, aside from the Pelicans, who is going to be the biggest free agent to switch teams this offseason? Is it, because, I don't think LeBron's leaving. Do you think it's LaMarcus Aldridge, or do you think it's somebody bigger than that?
No, it's going to be LaMarcus Aldridge. He's going to set the dominoes falling. That'll mean if Portland doesn't keep him, they're done. So we can expect them to not make the playoffs next year. Now, if San Antonio scores him, wow, that's going to be scary.
Is that where you think he's going, Ollie?
No, I actually think that was a lot of people have him going there, but I think he's either going to end up in Dallas or in L.A. with the Lakers, not the Clippers, but the Lakers. And he's going to have all the opportunity in the world in Dallas. Mark Cuban he's been looking for a star to bring to that team for, 4 years now, going on 4 years, and he hasn't had any luck. So he's going to throw out the red carpet for LaMarcus. But I've heard that he's got a home in Los Angeles, in Orange County. I could see him wanting to play for the Lakers, obviously. But it's LaMarcus for me. I've heard Kevin Love may leave, and DeAndre Jordan's also being pursued by Dallas and a few other teams. But I think it all centers around Aldridge.
Great stuff from Oleh Kosel. He has been our guest. Ollie, it's exciting times when free agency gets underway. And, I know that perhaps the Pelicans, in terms of the excitement meter as it pertains to the draft and upcoming free agency, if you list all 30 teams, they're going to be back there in the 20s. I don't expect any major moves. But the biggest, most exciting move is going to be when Anthony Davis re-signs. Not re-signs. He's under contract. When he signs the contract extension, how long, how much, and what day do you think they agree in principle to get this thing done?
Well, he could have it done as early as July 1st, but coming out of his camp, he's going to take a little bit of time. It's nothing to be alarmed by. He just probably wants to kind of get a feel for what Dell Demps is doing. This is typical. This is what agents tell their players, I think, to do. There's no way he's going to turn down the maximum contract he can get with the Pelicans, which is going to pay him, Scott, off the top of my head, what is it? It's around $140 million, I believe.
Yeah, I think it's like 142 or 43 over 5 years.
Yeah, but, there's no threat. If he doesn't sign on July the 1st, you can best believe there's going to be rumors flying out there that Anthony Davis doesn't want to come to New Orleans, but I hope the fans don't believe too much of that stuff. There's just no way he's not going to sign that contract like we were saying.
You don't think that you think there's potential it could just be a 3-year deal instead of 5?
No, I think he's going to do it for all 5 years. He's going to be making max money, and he's going to land another max contract, and with the endorsements he's got rolling in at his age, he has no need for all that money. He seems a lot more like a humble guy than the typical superstar. If this was Carmelo Anthony or somebody, I say, yeah, that threat might actually exist, but I don't think so with Davis. He hasn't given us any reason to think that way.
Oleh Kosel, our guest, we recorded this a little earlier in the day to accommodate the schedule, but as we were talking, did learn just now that Norris Cole and Jeff Withey have been giving qualifying offers. They're restricted free agents. That's not a guarantee they'll be back. It's just a sign that the Pelicans expect to bring them back. which isn't a big surprise. We thought they'd be back anyway, but just for clarity reasons, I wanted to let everybody know that Ollie and I didn't miss that. Just while we were recording, it came down. Ollie, continued success, my friend. I know you're busy. I kept you for a while, but you guys go check out the site. It's thebirdrights.com, thebirdrights, WRITES.com. On Twitter as well, at thebirdrights and at Red Hopeful for Ollie's own personal Twitter handle. Enjoy reading your stuff, my friend. If you ever need anything over here in Cajun Country in Lafayette, just reach out, and we'll talk to you again sometime down the road. And hopefully the Pelicans offseason that we expected to be quiet hasn't been so much with the holiday news. Hopefully we don't get any negative bombs dropped on us between now and the next time we chat.
Beautiful. Thank you, Scott, so much. And just real quick, one last sentence. I didn't mention my likes that I wanted for the free agents. I'm looking at Jay Crowder or Corey Brewer. Those are my top two. I would love to see Del Demps go trade this summer.
Jay Crowder and Corey Brewer, are they neck and neck, or do you like one more than the other?
I would prefer Crowder because he's familiar with Darren Erman, and he's probably also going to cost a little bit less. I think Corey Brewer is pretty much a lock to go back to Houston, but I don't think that's the case with Crowder and the Celtics. So that's the guy I've got my money on. I would love to have a Danny Green, but there's no way the Pelicans are going to be able to afford him. So we got to look a little bit lower.
We'll see. And, Crowder's restricted, but we've seen how much Dell likes to go after restricted players. So good eye for talent. I appreciate it, Ollie. All the best, my friend, and we'll talk again in the future.
Will do. Thanks, Scott.
You got it.